Modern online culture seems to have adopted a universal policy of self-truth.
Let's talk really quick about how important it is to stand in our own truths.
It's one of the rules in my book is that you should tell the truth, or at least you shouldn't lie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Orman, and you've got to stand in the truth.
British life coach and podcaster Jay Shetty tells his listeners to live their most authentic lives, even if it puts their relationships in jeopardy. Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Eat, Pray, Love, claims that power comes from standing in your own truth. Rapper Gucci Mane keeps it real 100% and encourages those in the industry to do the same.
You do come ask me something, you better have it together. I'm just gonna be a man with everybody I deal with.
These aphorisms, living your best life, keeping it real, standing in your truth, are they really the key to getting ahead? Why is it that people who already have money and power are the first to talk about self-truth? Yet they're the ones hiring tax experts to hide their gains, lawyers to protect their brands, and agents to spin their image. Don't get us wrong. The re-engineered you is not encouraging people to lie to themselves. We're not telling anyone to go into denial or self-deception or engage in a cognitive dissonance. But maybe, just as a thought experiment, we should look at the potential upsides of self-mythologizing. Successful athletes tell themselves we're underdogs. Successful lawyers tell themselves that they're on the right side of justice. Or if they've helped bad people get away with bad things, they tell themselves they serve the justice system itself. We're going to give you another historical example of self-mythologizing. But first, I want to play a little game. I want you to ask yourself, where did Al Capone die? Think back and try to remember from history class. Did Al Capone die in Alcatraz? In a state hospital? In transit between prisons? This might seem like a trivial detail, but the answer is very important. In part because so many of us get it wrong, but also because it almost seems like someone went to great lengths to mythologize how Capone actually met his end. So enough building suspense. According to Google, the number one place people wrongfully believe Capone died was in prison. Other groups on Reddit or Quora misremember Capone dying in the Alcatraz hospital, or a mob shooting, or in a holding cell. The reality is basically the opposite of what the world remembers. Would it surprise you to know that Capone was freed from prison lawfully, and that the most violent criminal mob boss in history spent nearly a decade in a comfortable retirement after being released? Most people get the part about his degenerative neurosyphilis correct. But what about Al Capone being privileged enough to receive the first penicillin treatments available to the public, which supposedly halted his mental decay according to his doctors? How many people think of a retired Al Capone dressed in his leisure wear, fishing from his boat, or in his garden catching butterflies with his granddaughter? How can so many of us misremember such a cornerstone of American history? Well, it has less to do with your bad memory and a lot to do with agents, judges, and lawyers who were involved in the Capone's case, and how everyone needed to invent a self-mythology to make themselves feel heroic after the fact, including Capone. Stick around, because we're about to prove that lying to yourself can be dangerous, but mythologizing about your own story might be the most profitable thing you've ever do. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet. So, you just asked a very interesting question, and I want to rebuttal on this. There is something called the Bernstein Bears effect or the Mandela effect. It's all over the internet, and it is nonsense and hokum. I really don't believe in it. It's the idea that there are alternate realities where it was originally named the Mandela effect because people misremembered Mandela dying in prison versus being released from prison after apartheid ended. The sort of like we'll call it like the UFO group and the group of people who believe in flat earth and the group of people who believe in other things, they think that there is like an alternate reality that we all live through where Mandela died in prison. The Bernstein Bears were actually the Bernstein Bears, and Al Capone died in a Alcatraz hospital. Um,
It's like one of those movies where they have different alternative endings, kind of thing.
yeah. So it is the I won't speak for you, but I will speak for me. It is my official position. I don't believe in the Mandela effect or that we came from a split universe and that we all misremember things. I think it's just I think we're very good at narrative and we all watch movies and we all listen to the media and our memory is heavily influenced by popular reporting.
And I think that if I'm studying anything about this show, I think it matters where your history is, where your country is, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think Japan's teaches their kids different things about World War II than the Germans do. I don't think it's the same.
Right. I think it's even regional. I think Chicago probably teaches their kids different things about Capone, whereas I grew up on the West Coast, so we learned about the Lewis and Clark Trail over and over and over again. So, like, yeah, I think it's also. I think you're right.
Well, Joe came up with this and brought this to me. He's done a lot of studying on Capone. We did the O'Hare International Airport, and we weaved the Capone story into that. So when I read this part about how Capone actually died, the first thing when Joe asked me the question is, I said he died in prison. I would have bet my life on it. So what I do on every show to see how interesting it is and see if it's a winner is I usually find people who are more educated than me and more interested than me, and I ask them what they think. And so what I did in my neighborhood's full of PhD retiree boomers. I went to one and said, how did Al Capone die? And before I even finished the question, they all said in prison in Chicago. They all said that.
Yeah.
And since I started getting the answer that I wanted, I started asking all of them. I started to go up to people I didn't know. And I asked 10 different people separately in my neighborhood. And they all said in prison.
I did.
They didn't say they didn't know. They all said he died in prison. They said it very sure.
Yeah,
confidently, exactly.
I asked 8 different people. One person said he was in a shootout and that killed him. And then everybody else said in prison. One person said in a what do you call it? In transit. Like they're like in a hospital, but not in a prison, but in custody. So I was like, okay, you think he was in custody, but died in prison. So I feel pretty confident. That's not a great sample size between you and I. That's not all the nation, but it's still enough for me to believe that most people, and according to Google, most people believe he died in prison or he died in custody. And our narrative is the actual history, which is, yeah.
And these were older people when he was more significant in the world. Let's face it. With 20 and 30-year-olds, Al Capone's not as significant as he is with 70 and 80-year-olds.
Right. I was trying to find a comparison to our current reality, like our current modern age. It would be like if we actually managed to convict the Sackler family and the guy that led the opium outbreak or the opioid crisis. It's what if he went to prison and then got released afterward, 8 years after going to prison. And then also, what if after that, everyone just sort of pretended he died in prison instead of getting a cushy retirement?
But there's just been so many. I mean, there's been so much Hollywood stuff based off of the Chicago mob in that period. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just been so pop culture that Al Capone is to murder and gang life what Einstein is to intelligence. You know?
Right. So for this episode, we kind of want to go person by person around Capone, like everybody who was in his orbit during his arrest, during his trial, and when he was released, and figure out why did so many people profit from effectively not reporting on how he ended his days. Like it wasn't on everybody to, like, the judge. It wasn't on him to tell everybody, okay, Capone's out and now he's retired and he's living a very comfortable life. It wasn't on the arresting agent. It wasn't on all these people. It's just interesting that all these people wrote books and screenplays and did interviews, and they published, they self-promoted to an extreme degree, honestly, and they all focused on putting him away, to the point where, like, it's almost like George Bush on that banner behind him on the battleship, where it's like mission accomplished, except for they hung the mission accomplished banner in every newspaper in Chicago and everywhere in the world, and everybody kind of neglected the part where he only spent like 8 years in prison. Or no, I don't remember exactly how long he spent. He only went to prison for, a couple of years, less than a decade. And then he was out fishing, like literally in leisure wear, on the, like, standing off the back of his boat. There are pictures of him doing that. And
I think chasing butterflies with his granddaughter is way more
yeah, that's
shocking,
literally what he did.
and just so, like, it's a sign of how we'd all want to end our lives.
Right.
And that he didn't get his comeuppance, and he's a serial killer in the most extreme kind.
Right. So obviously this benefited Capone, right?
Yeah.
So that's our question today is, and the reason why it's about Capone and not somebody. I would love to be like, let's look at somebody famous and amazing who has self-mythologized their way to victory. But honestly, that's everyone. Like it is so common. You almost can't pick out a celebrity or sports figure or somebody who has done incredible things, and you can't find one that hasn't self-mythologized to some degree. So really, this is just us talking about how profitable it is, and look at historical figures who shouldn't have, who really ought to have not. One of them was Al Capone, who self-mythologized, and we'll explain how he felt about himself, which is shocking. And then also the people who were around him in his life, what they self-mythologized and how it actually kind of hurt the nation and hurt our collective memories, and, like, even how we treat monsters. Like it in the end, everybody kind of made up their own hero story in their own head, and nobody was right, and it kind of hurt everyone. So I kind of want to, like, bring this back down to the ground for a couple seconds before we, get into the history and stuff. How do you have a time in your life where you told yourself a story about yourself to make you feel better about your trajectory? Like, if things were going bad, were you, like, telling yourself in some way, like, what was the story that you reflect on? You're like, that was probably wrong.
I think when I was struggling financially, I would just reassure myself of that of these previous times when I was this great salesperson, and that I made a lot of money. And I kind of like, if I did it before, I can do it again, even though I was not being true to doing all the same other things that I was doing back then too,
Okay. So you were telling yourself that, like, you're in a slump, but you're
right. I used to be the best. I was the top salesperson. Of course, the circumstances and the location, I was even in a different state, selling a different product. I mean, and then the old misconception, if you can sell this, you can sell anything. And that's just not true.
Right.
There's no selling candy bars and selling software at Salesforce is not the same thing. It's not. What about you? Have you put yourself, I guess I'm thinking of the pedestal, but I thought about it of just self-preservation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's mostly why people self-mythologize is first it's out of self-preservation, and then afterward it's about justifying what people have done. Like,
I think you want to get points to people to like you, though, right? I've done this and this, and I wrote a book, and I do public speaking, and I'm good at taekwondo, and we want people to like us, so we give these bullet points, these, you know.
Right. But what you are oftentimes does not match the narrative that you're telling yourself. The mythology part, the reason why we use that phrase specifically instead of just simply saying what is your self narrative, or what is your like internal monologue, your internal story, or just your sense of self. That'd be a much cleaner, easier way of saying it. We use the word mythology because it doesn't quite fit the facts of your life. And that's a lot of what successful people are doing oftentimes. My very obvious one was when I was younger. I was telling myself that I was, I'm going to, this is what I hear from a lot of guys is I'm a warrior is it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be, you could have a desk job and a young man will be like, well, I'm a warrior on the inside. I don't need this office job. You know, they can take it.
I'm thinking of you in Game of Thrones with one of those helmets on.
Yeah, everybody. There, after the show Vikings came out, there were suddenly a lot more people on Facebook posting about how they were Vikings and that they came from Viking heritage, and same thing with like Sons of Anarchy. People adopted that narrative. The Fast and the Furious came out, and suddenly there are a lot of people street racing. People invent or adopt narratives oftentimes based on what they see in media, and they sort of morph it to fit them.
I have an example of this. I had a customer, and he's a plumber, and he has the Viking beard, and he was telling me that he likes to do these strength competitions, and he goes to cold plunges, and he's very aggressively speaking, and he, you could tell that his how way he does his facial hair and everything. He's going for a certain, and his tattoos, and I do primal shit, and you could tell that he was getting himself worked up into this almost this character.
Yeah.
But and of course I'm thinking to myself, you're a plumber, and a dad,
right?
This is just a weird hobby. This is not who you are.
Right.
But it's so much more interesting than who he really is, I think,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm getting excited because you are hitting on exactly what I'm talking about. This is always going to be an episode where it took us a while to get into the idea or to really tease away the feeling or the soul of what we're talking about. But that's exactly what I'm talking about is I was giving out kind of like young male jokey, like almost cliche narratives people adopt when they see movies and things like that. But the more advanced version of that is Jeff Bezos becoming a space cowboy and telling himself that's what he is he's the next Howard Hughes, when in reality, no, he's just the most successful box mover on the world. Like yes, he is amazing, but in a different way than what he's inventing for himself in his own internal narrative. Same thing.
Or the athletes who become rappers, or the rappers who want to play basketball, who they literally,
Right. Or the oh god, who's the kid who runs Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook. There was a period of time where like he was telling himself he's a hunter and he's going primal, like what you said, and like he had videos of him like hunting his own meat and cooking it in his own backyard, and he's like, I'm gonna get back to being primal male and like hunt my own food and all this crap. And it's like, dude, you run a algorithm that's depressing teens and making radical people hook up online. You are not the primal hunter you think you are.
No, you went to Harvard. You
Right.
you've never even
So the question for us, the real question at the soul of this episode is that more profitable? Like not, is it self-deceptive? We kind of know it is. Not, is it lying to yourself, or is it cognitive dissonance? How much of that is healthy? Because we all do it. It doesn't matter who you are. You do a little bit of it. How much of it is profitable? How much of it is actually good for you? And the reason why we bring Al Capone into this, he did the same thing Zuckerberg did. Al Capone, can we talk about like his weird quotes about like being a good guy?
But please.
Okay, so Al Capone, first off, the myths about how many people he killed is false, and we can't stop making up stuff about it. Like even documentaries, even History Channel Presents or something like that, kind of flub his numbers and just say he's responsible for X amount of deaths. And it's true. His organization killed a lot of people.
No, I
and
was
they
just
were
doing
a
this with my
terror.
wife, talking about this show, Joe.
Yeah.
I was trying to because she's from the Philippines and she's not really a history anything. She just is not that interested. And I said, you don't understand. He was the most prolific. What do you call it? Prolific?
Yeah.
I can't even say it. Prolific serial killer of all time. He killed more people than all the mobsters combined. That's what I just said to her.
Right. No, that's
I don't. Why was I saying that?
because he's our American story. Like he's such a figure in America and such a figure of terror. And his organization really honestly did cause severe amounts of terror and the ripple effect. It isn't that he himself killed a lot of people. It's that he was peddling a illicit, illegal, addictive substance, and he had a lot of people working under him who did not use morals or good judgment while peddling that thing. And they would oftentimes resort to violence to defend their product or territory. The same could honestly be said of the Sacklers and the Purdue products. Like when I made
Sounds
the
kind of
comparison,
familiar, right? Because it's
Yeah.
and the drug you're talking about is alcohol, which was legal,
Right,
that
right,
became
of course.
illegal. He would have no power. He would have had to find a different drug if there wasn't prohibition, you know.
Right. Al Capone was dealing under the Volstead Act, which is like a prohibition of alcohol of any type. At least the Sackler family had they had been ordained by doctors and medicine to peddle their drug. But the reason I say that it was so it's to that scale, it's because before this, you talk about like the opium trade in China and the opium wars and things like that. And yes, we've always fought over drugs and alcohol, but this was a time where like America hadn't seen this level of violence in the streets. The St. Valentine's Day massacre was huge. Like that was, 7 or 8 people got executed behind an auto shop in broad daylight. That had never happened. Like that was the 1920s. That had never happened outside of a war, basically. So the numbers of people who got hurt during Prohibition, it's massive. It's an organization scale, but that's the way to think of it. Is the organization was mostly doing it. Capone himself, I really tried. Like I dug and dug and dug. Capone didn't kill that many people. Absolutely not the hundreds that Harvard Business School has an article that they claim hundreds, but then they use a very tricky phrasing. They say directly or indirectly related to his orders. So like.
It's a racketeering act, the RICO, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. They're wrapping him in with his organization. The two ones, the two murders that I could actually connect him to, he himself bragged about some of these. They were mostly in his 20s, so like again, take that with a grain of salt. One for sure that happened was he was in a craps game in New York where he shot a man in the stomach and left him bleeding. That's not exactly the Al Capone we hear about in like leaving somebody in the street bleeding does not confirm a death, and it does not necessarily mean they died. Like that wasn't part of a news report later that came out where it's like we know for a fact that he died. And the other one was a member of the White Hand Gang, who he also injured and left to die. He didn't stay around for the end. So,
but you can see why mytholizing that he was this monster would give him more power, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing is he believed that his violent, vicious, monstrous myth, he believed it was a put on. Like he himself was like, no, this is a reputation that I use to get money and to run my organization. In reality, he told himself a myth about his own reputation that he was a good guy with a bad temper, is literally the way he put it. He believed he was a man who brought delights and vices to people as if liquor were a service. And he used his fearsome reputation as a smokescreen, kind of like the way Blackbeard the pirate was like known for murdering everybody on the high seas. And in reality, he was out for the loot. Like he only murdered when necessary. He mostly just took ships and took money. And his organization
he was a businessman. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a direct quote from Al Capone that was published. Capone said, "I have spent the best years of my life giving people the lighter pleasures, helping them have a good time, and all I get is abuse and the existence of a hunted man." So like
See, now that narrative's interesting to me because if you really think about that, he's thinking of these speakeasies that and all these people having fun and dancing, and he's
Yeah.
thinking, yeah, I did have to break some eggs to make these omelets, but those guys had it coming to them anyways. But I've really been I kind of get that a little bit.
Right. And a lot of his violent rages, like when he would snap and become like he knew he had a temper. But he believed that when he unleashed that temper, it was against other gangsters, his own people. Like
Right.
he was an absolute freaking terror of a boss. That is 100% true.
But he wasn't
But
killing kindergarten teachers here either. They were all in the business, right?
exactly, yeah. Personally killing hundreds of people, not so much. Did lots of innocent people get hurt by him? Yeah. I would put him on the level of kind of like, I mean, like he's an upper level manager who's also a coward and who thinks he's doing a service, and in reality, he's running a business that is like killing people. I know I probably have like a warped moral take on this. I don't look up to Al Capone whatsoever. I think he was a bully and an asshole, but he didn't personally murder hundreds of people like the boogeyman stalking night, in the night with a knife. Like he wasn't Jack the Ripper. He would fly into a temper and scare the crap out of his own mobsters, and then they would tell it to reporters, and then those reporters would tell it to authors, and then they'd put it in the newspapers, and it made him seem like he himself was like, had so much blood on his hands. Um, but that's not all. Like there were 5 or 6 other people who made up crazy, wild self mythologies to justify what they did during the Capone trials. Because we're talking about like some of the biggest names in history. There was like a judge and like famous agents who declared mission accomplished, and they weren't even really involved in taking him down. The movie The Untouchables, that's all about Elliot Ness and how he took down Capone, which I'm not going to spoil it, but in our next section, he didn't take down Capone, and we'll explain why, and why Elliot Ness would claim that, and why we'd all remember that. That's the other thing is who arrested and took down Capone, and that's another one where everyone tells me Elliot Ness, and we'll get to why that is a misunderstanding. And same thing with the lawyers and judges themselves, and the actual weapon that put him to justice. It wasn't the St. Valentine's Day massacre that he went away for. A lot of people know that he went away for tax evasion, but people don't remember who got him on tax evasion. So we're going to get into that. We're going to get into the good guys, the honest to God good guys who were basically inventing their own mythology in their head to explain why they're the hero of the story. When in reality, the pool of people who put Capone away was far smaller, and he didn't stay away, and that again would have stung to say that out loud for these people. So I guess let's enough of me droning on about Al Capone and the misunderstandings and the Bernstein Bears. Let's talk about what is productive self-mythologizing. We don't want to be on the level of Mark Zuckerberg, looking foolish and telling ourselves that we are a primal hunter, hunting our own meals despite our massive paycheck. We don't want to be on the level of Jeff Bezos getting made fun of by magazines like Vanity, who is like, this guy is a clown, like he's going to space, and meanwhile, thousands of people are slaving away in his warehouses. We want a self mythology like some sports figures who tell themselves they're the underdog, and that's how they got there.
A couple of healthy ones popped into my head.
Yeah, was it Lady
And
Gaga?
Well, no, I'm thinking just in the middle class, upper middle class nowadays. But I'm thinking a nurse who is the healer and the lover and the nurturer, and then I think of the ex military retired who sees themselves as a real life American hero, and the police officer too as the protector, right? But they become that. Their job is, you know what I mean? And they probably overvalued their contribution to society a bit.
Right. The reality is that we already in politics we talk about, okay, well, was your military service in action or not? And
well, right, yeah.
and the cop, how much policing did you do? Did you catch criminals or did you do paperwork? And that's the thing is I okay, well, I'll ask this as a question. do you choose to give everyone the benefit? Do you say, yes, these people are heroes, it doesn't matter what they did, even if they only ever push paperwork, as long as they wear that title for X amount of time, they are actually a hero? Or do you go with, no, they're mythologizing to themselves in a way where they're giving them too much credit?
If I like them, I will hold them in high esteem.
If they're likable.
And if I can pick them apart, or if I know them better, I think that's what it is. When you get past and you actually get to know them and what's involved in it, it's a big yeah, but where do you stand with that?
I think on a case-by-case basis, I think you're right. There are some people where a very good friend of mine who used to attend our weekly games was an 8-year combat Marine, and he never talked about, let me put it a different way. He never talked about the glory. He never talked about like what he, like people think for his service or anything like that. He just complained his ass off about bureaucracy. So like, and I always thought, I was like, well, that's what a hero should be. They should be an annoyed complainer who doesn't focus on their own narrative, like in their own head.
Well,
But
and
he also believed that. Like I do know that on a certain level, he did believe himself. Yeah, I served my country. I was a hero, and damn straight he deserved that. Like I fully believe that.
Well, that's the one I challenge. That the biggest challenge I have is because I was in the Army, and then some of these guys I was in with would act that way.
Yeah.
And they would act like because they went to something for 8 weeks that they were a born killer, and that they, are warriors who could kill 10 people with their weapons and their guns. And of course, it's ridiculous.
I think the better question for somebody who gives themselves a heroic mythology or narrative is ask them why they did it. It's not what did you do, it's why did you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if a police officer can actually tell you, I wanted to protect and serve the public and the common good, then that is a hero. Or if somebody says they had a really good retirement package and I wanted to move into something bigger, that's different.
And I see that about law enforcement. They talk more about how they see horrible things in this, but they don't talk about the pensions, how they retired when they're 44, how they've had an amazing life. I see a real lack of gratitude for what they got to do and a lack of love for what they did. I just hear, like your friend, the negative.
Yeah.
And you think, well, to me, that always comes off as a lack of gratitude, and you don't deserve that job or that position or that status in your family or in the community when you're just an ungrateful bastard,
We're being very, that's this episode is just we bash on actual heroes. They're worse than Al Capone. No,
we're already police officer nurses. We hold it lower regard than Al Capone.
I think what is more important is some self-mythologizing is deserved, but the degree changes. And what I mean by that is somebody who served in the military, they get to tell themselves that they serve their country 100%. But making it into their entire personality and banking their future goodness, treating that like that's their good deed they did to get into heaven, conflating service with like it reflects on their moral character. Like they can now be a jerk, or they can now be irresponsible, or they can now cheat on their taxes because they had the service, or because they were a hero. There's actually an effect in psychology where you can measure how much goodness somebody does and how much they allow themselves to get away with afterward. It's like if somebody donates a vast amount to a charity in the same year, they will then allow themselves to like run so many red tickets or cut people off in traffic or things like that. People balance the good they think they've done, the good in their head and their mythology about themselves. They'll balance it with negative things. And that is just human nature. Like it is, part of it is like, well, don't I deserve respect for these things that I've done? Or don't I deserve something for this thing that I've survived, or this thing that I've lived? It is Jeff Bezos being like, everyone should hail me as the next space hero because I put on a cowboy hat and I made a rocket, and he's claiming it's for humanity, when in reality it's publicity. Like it benefits him.
And how did that? Where's the cutoff line of the people around you too? That you insulate yourself with the people that will let you. They see you as your best self, or as high as you want to see yourself. I was keep thinking about the singer Prince, who changed his name and wouldn't let people refer to him as, you know what I mean? And
Right.
to be on his team or his entourage and be that $100,000 a year friend, you really have to pump, sunshine up to them all the time, right? So how much they just surround themselves with this. You see this in athletics a lot, Joe, where these athletes who are 6'7" and blessed from God, and then have worked out and they were the best in middle school, high school, college. They've had coaches, trainers, offers from colleges, press from when they were little. They say no one ever believed in me, and it's almost frightening. They fuel themselves off it, and everyone has believed in them. They've gone to every camp. They've been driven around. Their parents' friends believed in them. Their pastors, their school teachers helped them with their homework. It couldn't be more false.
Right. So let's slide that into one of our definitions. Let's start with how do we know a mythology is false and that we're getting too far into real myth, like we're actually telling ourselves stories rather than telling ourselves, spinning ourselves the way we want to be seen. Let's start with the people around you agree. That's a big one. The people around you do believe you're a hero. The people around you do agree that you are, and they're respectable. Al Capone's yes men nodding, frightened, telling him, yes, you are a servant, like you're a servant of the people. Yes, you are bringing them liquor and joy and happiness. And my God, you're a good person for it, Mr. Capone. That is not a valid test. And anybody worth their salt, or anybody who is capable of self-reflection, would know that. They know that I am asking the wrong people. I'm asking the yes men in my life. Instead, ask your mentors. Ask the people who have a strong opinion and are clear-eyed and are good at judgment. Ask them how they see your mythology. How do they see your past and your accomplishments? What do they see you as? If you respect people and they are respectable and they do see you as a war hero, or they do see you as a athlete who did everything they could to drag themselves up by their bootstraps, like they actually were passed over for opportunity, then you deserve that part of your mythology that is benefiting you and it's helping you. If you start asking people around you, do I deserve this mythology I give myself, and they kind of hem and haw about it, or they're looking at their feet, then that's a really good sign that everybody kind of lets you have that and they don't question it, because it would take time and it would hurt you to do that.
Right. Do you think the danger in this too is mismeasuring what your ceiling is? That you kind of can, if you can do this and get these feelings and these emotions, that you're kind of already peaking and you're not.
I think it's Rocky syndrome. I think that everybody who first saw the movie Rocky when it came out, they were like, I could be so much better than I am now, but I'm saving my potential. Like they're giving themselves a heroic mythology, but what they're really doing is they're keeping themselves back. They're pretending like they'll put in the effort later. They'll run on the beach later. Like they'll
Right.
they'll write their book later, and they're saving it for later. And that is a self-delusional heroic mythology. And that's another thing is ask yourself what tangibly has happened from your mythology. Like is it earned? Did you do the things you said you did? Were you actually a participant in your own mythology? We've had friends through Toastmasters. Like we've met people who were in serious positions of public power, and they were like in political positions, or they were like lawyers, or they were doctors, and a lot of them had self mythologies that they would talk about stories about themselves, and you're like, yeah, that never happened. Like there's no way. Or if it did, you are spinning it or inflating it because you believe this about yourself. But damn it if it isn't entertaining, and you have done something. So you deserve to tell yourself something. Now, do they benefit from that? That's the profit part. Is Do you ever think letting people live there a little bit of a lie, is that profitable for them?
I think it is. I think it is. I using it. The place I go, they own these wellness clinics where you get cryotherapy and IVs and everything, and they have one in Southern California, and they often talk to me about the famous people that come in. That wrestler John Cena. You know who he is. He's kind of a movie star kind of guy.
John Cena, yeah.
Cena, yeah. And they told me a story about him and how he gets bothered by people all the time. And I just thought that was weird. How could you be put out when you spend your whole life promoting yourself? How can you want to be famous and then not want people to notice you? To me, it just seems it doesn't make any sense. And it's and so many people put so much money and so much time into it, and it seems like it's a weird thing. But they are just human, and they're not. And he's a prime example of someone I don't see with any real talent. Certainly not movie star acting talent. Yes, he wrestled in college or whatever, but that's not really a very competitive sport on the world stage. You know what I mean? It's and he's all on steroids, and it just seems so phony. Like I'm thinking, he can't possibly believe that he's this great actor and everything, does he?
Well, have you seen the latest season of The Bear? Because he's a guest spot on there, and I think no, he's not a good actor. He's a fun actor. He plays himself, and I love it.
Exactly.
No, that's a good example, and he wears a mythology about himself on himself, like he lives his own mythology, and a lot of it is backstory. A lot of it is inventing a narrative and deciding it suits you.
And they're at the tipping point. These guys who are these movie stars with these big muscles are on a enormous amount of steroids. So to be true and genuine to yourself, you don't take that amount of a of a thing that you couldn't be in any pro sport, because your whole team would be dirty just from you. And they say he's just so big and strong. Well, of course, anybody is who eats and takes that much steroids.
Yeah,
it's impossible not to be.
So we're going to link to a Psychology Today article. It's not about John Cena. It's just about how to define self-mythology and whether or not it's value to you to do that. I'm going to say, and this is just my outsider judgment, and my judgment means very little except for I try to be right about the things we present, but I don't try to be right about my opinions because they're just opinions. I'm going to say John Cena gets a pass. It's a lot of mythology, and you're right. It's a lot of steroids, and it's a lot of inventing a narrative and wearing it. But I'm going to say yes because in this Psychology Today article, they talk about two things to look out for is what obstacles do you face? The amount of heroism in you is entirely defined on like what you have overcome and what you have faced and what you have been able to get over. You are defined by the difficulties you have overcome. If you have willfully chosen to not overcome anything, if you have tried to stay at home, and if you have tried to avoid embarrassment, pain, hurt, hard work, anything like that, and that mythology allowed you to avoid things, then we're going to say it's negative.
So are you saying that because he's landed the plane and is outrageously successful, and that everything he does is kind of because he couldn't be a 175-pound man and have his fame? So doing those things are kind of almost steps, right?
Yeah.
He has to keep that cartoon-like body. He has to for his wrestling and for his TV and stuff, because we wouldn't want to see him at that size. So but that's different from somebody who doesn't have his famous success, is not a WWE wrestler, but acts similar socially, right, who's just a meathead at the gym, right?
I'm going to say unsuccessful wrestlers, or really just anyone who actually puts on their boots, actually puts on, the mask, the suit. If it's a suit and tie, if it's a pair of boxing gloves, if it's, whatever. If your mythology you tell about yourself motivates you, it gets you moving,
yeah,
and it pushes you toward facing obstacles that otherwise you wouldn't, that is a good self-mythology. That is
I
a
think so
good internal
too.
narrative to have in your
And
mind.
you don't have to be in the WWE, but you could be wrestling at a local event in, let's say where you are in Austin, Texas. But if you get that feeling and get that attention from the crowd and from your family, this come see me Saturday night. You know, putting myself out there. I think that's noble. That's respectable.
Yes. And that's a mythology that is serving you. And if it's not too far from the truth, it's probably profitable and probably positive for you. The difference is if a mythology is justifying what you've done already and it was bad. If you are if you're Jeff Bezos and you paid a lot of people minimum wage to tear up their knees in your box factory, and now you're telling yourself you're a space cowboy, that's a detrimental self mythology, and you don't deserve it. If you are telling yourself a mythology like I'm a retired cop, I was a hero, I deserve respect, and in reality you were a complete asshole to everybody you ever met, um, and now you are just a retired asshole, and that's your justification for not doing anything else of service or just anything. You now just watch old episodes of Law and Order. I know I'm pandering a stereotype, but what I'm saying is that if your
No, I think
mythology allows you
but
to
that is
do,
a common thing, right? We
yeah,
passing on post titles and post things when that's not who we are, what we did, or it's not really remembering how things really were. You know, and we do that
yeah,
with relationships too. We romanticize time with people or
oh,
demonize it. We seem to have to be that the person was the worst or the best. You know,
oh God, yes, and it can be very common. It can be your mythology can be, I was an amazing husband or an amazing father, and now you're divorced or you're an empty nester, and it's like, it doesn't matter who you are. If your mythology allows you to do nothing, if your mythology allows you to avoid facing anything or growing as a person, that's a negative mythology, and especially it's especially pernicious if not only is it not truthful, but it makes you into a hero when in reality you have settled or stopped your moving. Like if you are choosing to sit in place and your mythology is allowing you to do that, then that is a detrimental mythology. That is
so
yeah.
in building a mythology, if you were to, in a personal question, if you were to take Joe Anthony as the writer, or let's say take one personal mythology and then a professional mythology, how would you build that? And you haven't done it yet. What would be something that you think would serve you well, status socially, and then your career financially?
Okay, I if we're talking me and you're saying how would I build a mythology that is more beneficial than what I'm doing now, um
Or that you
the
should have
myth
done because you know better?
oh yeah, the mythology I tell myself is that I was an award-winning contest short story writer, and
Which
it's
is true.
true. It is true. But what I should be telling myself is I am an up and coming published author, and I should be spending more time working with my peers, asking questions of people who know better than me, like interacting with people in the field who know how to do it. I allow myself to have the mythology of I was a winner in this field. What I should be doing is I'm a
Like a
worker in this
plateau.
field. Yeah,
Like you reach this hook on the, you climb and you reach this, and now you're over that, when it's probably what it is an open door to work with other people and put you in the club that,
exactly.
because studying storytelling with Joe, the people that can mentor Joe now at his level don't have time to mentor everybody. It's not 101. So they're only going to work with people that they think have put the reps in and have potential to do something special in writing, right?
Yeah. At this level, if somebody is willing to give you feedback, um, and they're from a writers group or something, and they've published at that level or competed in the top of the field, they are being a saint if they are willing to reach down to you and just read your stuff for 5 minutes. But honestly, the mythology I should be giving myself is somebody who is wandering and is trying to find other people who are good. I should think of it as like an old martial arts movie where it's like you're good now,
You're
you got to
good
go
for your
challenge
brother.
other people. Yeah.
So are you
Now,
following up on this? It does not sound like you have a plan on how you could do this. It sounds like you're wandering in your thoughts here. Am I?
It'd be join a professional writers group, and it would be to pull the trigger on the feedback I've gotten from the amazing writers who have given me feedback. There's the embarrassment of feedback I've gotten from best-selling writers at this point, and all of their feedback is brief and great and awesome, and it's pursue this, publish this, send this to these magazines, and I almost never do it. That if you want to see the Capone moment for me, it's I hardly ever take the good professional advice. I almost always just choose to tell myself, I'll get there eventually. I'll do it eventually. I'm an
Yeah.
award-winning contest writer, short story.
And
Blah,
that's a
blah, blah.
self-sabotage right there.
And it is. And
When they gave you the ingredients to make this cake, and you said, "Well, I'll do that someday." Yeah, that is true.
yeah, it is Capone telling himself, I bring joy to people in the form of liquor. It is. Yeah. It's was it the Sackler telling himself, like Purdue Pharma telling himself that I'm taking away people's pain. That's how he justified, killing so many people and addicting so many people.
Well, that's my fear of this too. The other day, studying for this show, I threw away one of my public speaking trophies because I thought this is not good to have this around, because I know how I feel every time I see it. I think I'm good at something I used to do.
Yeah. Do you feel like that is something where, like, if you pursue it again, you earn it again?
I think so, and I think the biggest thing where just to shock myself is the fear of losing where I was at, and I hope you have the same thing too. Like, if you don't pursue this and you don't do this, then you really are a fraud, because
Yeah.
can you imagine if you find, and we talk about being ready for when it is your time, and we have different peaks in our life. The nice thing about Joe's profession as a writer is it's one of the few professions where you peak when you get older. It's a long, because it takes so long, and it takes so much life experience. It takes so many reps and so much different exercises. So, but we don't want to, we talk about leave this world without putting our name on, taking our best shot at whatever, and knowing what our ceiling is and trying to hit it.
Yeah.
That's my biggest concern is not to do the best that I can do.
You want to be the old high school football star who moved on and got a great job and supported his family and became a good person. You don't want to be the high school football star that's their peak and that's all they ever did, and they just tell themselves, I used to be an athlete.
And that's what I think about, like a musician who didn't make it. Moved in the 80s, they moved to be in a hair rock band, but now that person put his kids through college in a sound studio, and is in the union, and has helped make beautiful music and interesting, and even commercials, has done something that's and kept evolving because they love what they do so much, they just want to be close to it.
Right. And that's hopefully what we get to today is we want to find a way to mythologize to ourselves in a way that helps us evolve more. I early in the episode, I kept using the phrase profitable, but really what that means is you evolve from it. It does not give you a reason to stop.
I'm okay with that, because I think money's good because we can measure it.
Yeah.
And we think, and I do believe no matter what you're good at, if you're really good at it, you're going to make a lot of money. Those two things go together.
Yeah. Well, we've we've basically covered almost all of the things we could have said about what makes a good mythology versus bad mythology, and how to define it, and how to look at it for yourself and define it. Can we talk about the people around Capone who gave themselves a mythology that didn't fit or did fit, and who effectively allowed Capone to have a false ending?
Please. Yeah.
So I went looking for recent, not documentaries, but just like anything that was filmed or published about him recently that would be correct the misunderstanding for the public. And it's the opposite. Almost everything written or put to screen about Capone, it was done in a way where it actually muddies these waters and makes it worse. There's a Tom Hardy movie that came out just a couple of years ago called Capone, and it was about him in retirement. And I was excited. I was like, man, this is gonna be great. Like, Like somebody actually talks about Capone not dying in prison or not like once they get Capone, the movie ends literally like The Untouchables. I was like, this is going to show him fishing and catching butterflies with his daughter. And no, it's complete bullshit. Like it shows him going insane and in these sort of fugue states in his own mind. It shows him killing tons of people, and it shows things that never happened. He starts shooting at like people in his own house, like that never happened. Like, so it's complete fiction. And the writer basically came out and admitted that they're like, no, I wrote this to be almost like a dramatic play, like for stage.
Yeah. Loosely based on.
Yeah. So even in modern times, we're still not telling the right story about him to reflect the reality, which is he had a comfortable retirement. But then there's the people who put him away, and they mythologize things too. So let's start with Eliot Ness, because that is the most obvious one. How familiar are you with Prohibition agent Eliot Ness and the things that have been written about him?
I probably watched that Untouchables movie 100 times back in the day. It was a very exciting movie. The one with Robert De Niro, who gained all the weight to play Capone, right?
Yeah, and Kevin Costner, and it was written by David Mamet. Yeah, it was fantastic.
I'm getting chills thinking about it. So that was the extent of my education, was that movie.
Yeah. That was my first introduction to Eliot Ness. We watched it in school. Like, if you want to know why
that's funny, right? That's how they're teaching history, is by showing
that's how we learned about Al Capone, is they showed us the movie The Untouchables, which I now know is very, very fictionalized. And that's kind of how a lot of Americans learn history, is we have historical movies that are based on history. But here's the stuff they kind of leave out. In the movie, Eliot Ness, played by Kevin Costner, does several bad busts. Like he tries to get a liquor warehouse. Like he tries to find people like illegally hoarding liquor, and like he's led astray by crooked cops. And then he pulls together a crack team of people who are so good at heart they can't be bought, and that's why they're called the Untouchables. And then suddenly they start cracking down, like, liquor busts, and they get, shipments of liquor, and they start taking, liquor off the streets. And it shows at the very start of the movie, like a young kid, and they're like, I think it's their mother, like they die from a bomb that was set by one of these liquor thugs. And
so then their core value was they're an orphan because
they're protecting
of this.
family. Yeah.
And then this is why they're the way they are, that they can never be bought.
So it shows what's at stake, and it's the public is at stake, and that's ideally what you want a show to demonstrate. And then it shows Kevin Costner throughout the course of this movie chasing Capone, getting evidence, finding out where he's putting his money, moving things around. Like they track down his bookie, and they try to, there's a bunch of deaths, and at the end they finally get him into court. And they realize that Kevin Costner's like, oh no, the jury has been bought, and they've been paid off, so like they're never going to convict Capone. And he proves it, like he throws another thug off the roof and proves it, and all that stuff. In reality, Ness's case disappeared or evaporated in court. He brought the case for liquor charges against Capone, and federal judge James H. Wilkerson threw it out. Like he was like, this won't stick, and even if it does, it's not going to stick the way you think it will. Like it won't put him away for as long as you want. Wilkerson chose a more promising but unrelated case that was being presented to him by the Secret Service. Chief Frank J. Wilson, who was the Secret Service chief, decided to go with tax evasion. Like he presented it. So like the Secret Service chief himself presented this, and it was a case involving tax evasion and dog track winnings. And that's where Todd and I did an episode about the guy that ran the dog tracks and was one of the first, not inventor. He knew the inventor of the electric rabbit that ran around the track. And so he was like, no, the bookie is O'Hare. Eddie O'Hare was the guy they should have shown in the movie The Untouchables. It should have been, here's this guy with this amazing kid, Butch O'Hare, who's going to save an
it
entire
wasn't even
destroyer
the,
himself.
it wasn't
Yeah.
even the same case. It was like they were in a whole different department of the government working on it. Like Eddie
Right, exactly.
O'Hare and Elliot Ness. Eddie O'Hare was a cricket attorney who ran he ran a bunch of racetracks with Al Capone. He was like a part owner. So, and he was his accountant. So he had access to all those things. So,
Right.
which would have been way more interesting a movie because the Eddie O'Hare story is actually interesting.
That would have been an awesome story. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, the reason why we remember the movie and Elliot Ness is because we all remember Ness as being the hero that locked up Capone because Ness wrote an amazing TV-worthy autobiography. Like, Elliot Ness deserves respect for being a prohibition agent and actually making alcohol busts. Like, that's what he did. And yes, it did save neighborhoods and it saved kids and things like that from an amount of alcohol that would have ended up on the streets through, distribution. But he shouldn't get credit for Capone. And the reason why that happened is Elliot Ness was doing what we talked about. He retired, like he was basically a retired law enforcement agent. He was basically like rethinking his own reputation. Like, what was I in all this? How big of a role did I play? And he wrote an amazing autobiography called The Untouchables. And it had gunfights, it had action, it had all these cool things.
but
And
it
at
wasn't
the
a
end,
biography about what happened, though. It really wasn't.
well, yeah, it's what happened with his squad and his people.
Right.
And at the end, Capone goes away, and we kind of just gloss over the part where it wasn't his case that did it.
But isn't that crazy? But you're not even the guy that did it. I guess the combined pressure, or awareness. I don't know. That's a stretch, though. It's a stretch at best.
It is exactly that. And the funny part about that is that Elliot Ness made that stretch, and it became whatever everyone accepted. And the story ended with Capone got thrown away. I mean, like, that's how the old series, the original Untouchable series, ends. That's how the movie ends. It's Capone went to jail, mission accomplished, and we don't investigate, his luxurious retirement afterward. The judge, and also the Secret Service chief, they went on with their careers. Again, mission accomplished. They mythologize to themselves. They're like, hey, I am the career judge, the man who put away Capone. Mission accomplished. And same thing with the Secret Service chief. Like, he did give credit. The Secret Service chief said, on the inside of the gang, I had one of the best undercover men I have ever known, Eddie O'Hare. So he did actually name O'Hare and give him credit.
That's in the credits, though. That is not the whole story. That is like giving someone acknowledging a bunch of people. Yeah, and then this person. Yeah, that's.
But he ran the Secret Service after that as the man who got Capone, and as sort of this mythical figure, even in his own mind. So, like,
but that's what I'm saying. This is shameless self-promotion to the level of Evel Knievel. This is. I am the greatest law enforcement. I took down the biggest gangster, and I did it in the most unique way. This is taking credit for a lot of other people's work, no matter how you look at it.
We just named 4 different people who, in their own mental mythology, are the one that took down Capone. It can't be all 4 of these people. Like, all 4 of these people can't be the one that took down Capone. They all played a part, but they mythologize what part they played.
How big of the cake how big of the pie that was theirs, right?
Or how it happened, or if their case even went to trial. Yeah, exactly. The
real story, I got to say this real quick, is Eddie O'Hare. He was a crooked lawyer who owned these dog tracks all over, in Boston and Chicago, all over in Florida. And he was trying to get his son, Butch O'Hare, into the military academy for pilots. But you had to have a congressperson or someone, and he had a lot of those on payroll, but the only way he could get his son in was to flip on Capone. So he did a deal, trading his life, because he knew Capone was going to cut him in half with bullets, to get his son in the military. And his son went on to become an amazing pilot and save many lives in the Pacific. And that's what they named Chicago. O'Hare Airport is named after Butch O'Hare, the airline pilot, the military pilot.
Right. Yeah.
But only because he flipped on Capone. And he did end up getting killed, Eddie.
Yeah. And you talk about an awesome story about a father getting redemption and changing their family legacy. That was one of our early episodes. I don't remember what number it was, but yeah, go look at our O'Hare episodes. I think it was a 2-parter. But I think the king of self-mythologizing in this story is Al Capone's brother. He had a couple brothers. That's a lesser known fact is he had several brothers. Some of them were in the mob with him. Like he had a brother named Bottles, and Bottles Capone with a nickname like that. You obviously he's a gangster. But have you ever heard of the oldest Capone brother, James Two Gun Hart?
No, I've heard of Ralph. The only one I've heard of.
Yeah, Ralph is Bottles, by the way.
Oh, is that Bob?
There was a movie a long time ago. It was like the 40s, The Lost Capone. This guy's name was, well, he was born James Vincenzo Capone, and he ran away early. Like he ran away from the family. And this is before they were in the mob business. So like this wasn't him running away from the mob. This was him running away from, he just didn't like being in an Italian family in America, to the point where he ran away to the circus, and while in the circus worked very hard to get rid of his Italian accent. That was one of the first things he did, is he practiced hard to lose his accent, because at the time there's a lot of anti-Italian sentiment. And while he was on this sort of wild flight across the country, he taught himself to be a sharpshooter. Like he just had a lot of time, and he had people to train him, and he became a sharpshooter, and then that allowed him to volunteer to be a prohibition agent. So
which would seem something that wouldn't be in the family's best interest to have a prohibition agent in the family.
Right, exactly.
How can you make that up? Al Capone's brother was a good guy.
His older brother was a anti-alcohol prohibition agent who was literally tracking down the people that was feeding alcohol to the mobs. So like the opposite. He was the mirror image of Al Capone, both in this role and physically. He was Al Capone's kind of like dark-haired and pudgy and kind of grinning. Two Gun Hart. We'll get to why he has that nickname. James Hart, whose real name is Capone, the older brother, he is lean and angry looking. He looks like a drill sergeant. And he has no Italian accent.
Isn't that weird? I understand there was discrimination, but usually when there's that, you want to get closer with your tribe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He said, no, I got to get out of this. It's not me.
And the funny part is he had no idea his family was in the mob. Like he went west. So like he wasn't even on the East Coast where the Capone family was operating. He wasn't in Chicago. He was in the Dakota territories. So like he changed his name. First, the name change. Why did he change his name to James Hart? Well, Hart was William Hart was a silent Western cowboy star. And so he's like, oh, okay, I'll name myself after this Western cowboy because that's what I want to be. So he is speaking with an American accent. He takes on a cowboy's last name. He got the name Two Gun because he started leading successful alcohol raids in Nebraska. And like while leading these raids, he's a sharpshooter. And so he's like proving that he can shoot and he can make busts. And he's so successful. He gets basically his pick of assignments in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, basically becoming law enforcement for the Indian Territories. And usually when somebody became, you've seen the movie Killers of the Flower Moon?
Yes.
Usually somebody who becomes a law enforcement agent in Indian Territories is there to harass them.
Take
James
advantage,
Hart,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Like abuse their position, basically. James Hart, as best as we know, actually went after killers. And he arrested at least 20 known killers in the Spokane Indian Reservation area. And at one point, he was so kind of like well-known and acclaimed within his job that when Calvin Coolidge showed up, the president, Calvin Coolidge, was going to South Dakota. He was given the opportunity to be his bodyguard while in the Indian Territories. So he
was an officer with honors, right? I mean,
yeah. Not just an officer with honors, he was a Boy Scout, literally a Boy Scout, and not as a boy. Like he was named District Commissioner of the Boy Scouts of America as an adult. So like he was the district commissioner for Boy Scouts. So like the older brother of Al Capone was a goddamn Boy Scout.
I think just the whole everything about him, his build. It's hard to imagine anyone but being that pudgy, Capone looking
Yeah.
scumbag. Even when Capone died of syphilis, you just think this guy's just such a sleazeball, right? He's just a scumbucket, and his brother just sounds like the perfect, person
Right.
who's born to defeat his brother, right?
Yeah. It wasn't he certainly lived a hard life. And by the way, he did defeat one of his brothers, not Capone, ironically, but well, first he had a run of bad luck. He was convicted of manslaughter because he was chasing a wanted man who wouldn't surrender, and under dubious circumstances ended up killing the person he was pursuing. And so that was a black mark against him. Is we don't know the circumstances around that. It could be that somebody just didn't want to stop, and so he was a sharpshooter. He
Or it
stopped
could
him.
be, or it could have been a vigilante that he just didn't think he deserved to do any
It
more
could be that,
paperwork with this guy. He's just like, I'm just gonna put him out of his misery.
He's like, right, I'm a hero
Yeah.
agent, and I've escorted the president before.
I'll never
shoot
get in
people
trouble for this.
if
I can
need
do
to.
this.
Yeah. He did get in trouble. He basically, after the prohibition ended, he was out of a job, and so he became a marshal. And then he lost his marshal position because after prohibition, there was really hard economic times, and we were entering the Depression. And he shoplifted food from a grocery store in the middle of the Great Depression, and he had wife and kids. So like, he was the pillar of the community. He was an actual marshal, and he shoplifted, and he had a family. So they were like, no, you can't be a marshal anymore.
It's kind of a very interesting life. See, I'd rather see a book about this guy and movies about this guy.
I know, right? Yeah, he's way more interesting. But then here's the fun part. Al Capone was released from prison, and then James Hart reunited with Al Capone while Capone was in retirement, basically. And before this, he only knew about Al Capone, the gangster, because he opened a newspaper one day. Like he was living in Dakota, opened a newspaper. He's like, holy shit, my brother is the head of a mob.
He's like, he was always a terrible child.
Right.
That must have been shocking to see that your brother's famous and then that he's infamous, right?
Right, exactly. It's like, yeah, I knew that guy was a troublemaker. Right,
you're kind of impressed, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think anytime you're the best or the worst at anything, it's kind of impressive.
I can just imagine him gritting his teeth and just grunting like your grandpa, like just total disapproval. But here's where things kind of get interesting: is James Hart took one last crack at crime, and it was his own family. And the way that went down is he drives to Chicago one time to meet with his family once, because it's like Al's out from prison. Ralph Bottles Capone is being pursued but hasn't faced justice yet. And so James Hart meets with his brothers at Ralph's place, like his home, and they talk, and they never release what they talked about to the public. I don't know of any newspapers that got their conversation, but apparently James did not like what he heard from his mobster brothers, because he went back to Nebraska. Sorry, by now he's living in Nebraska. He went west again. He's like, no, I'm not going to be in Chicago. At the time, his brother was like doing the same kind of tax evasion crap that that Capone did, and so that's when the public learns about James Hart's real identity. Is Ralph Bottles Capone. If you know your history, he goes to trial for tax evasion. And this time, while he's up for tax evasion, they call on a witness. And the witness they call is the lost Capone brother, the older brother nobody knows about. And this is where Two Gun Hart shows up walking with a cane. And the reason why at this point James Hart is walking with a cane is because he has diabetes, and it has hit his legs. So like, he's not a marshal anymore. He's got diabetes. He's basically retired. He is a retired hero, almost exactly what we talked about throughout this episode. And he goes to trial, and he testifies against his brother Ralph, because Bottles Capone, Ralph, tried to put things in his name to like hide them from taxes, and like I think it was like a house or something like that, and basically also testifies about the stuff that they told him during their secret meeting together.
Still seems like a more interesting movie than
the
that's I can just see him limping into court with his cane. You know what I mean? And everyone, I see the gasp, like, who the hell? You know?
Yeah, and
he lives, like, right?
And then somebody calls out his real name. Like the judge is like, we will now call Vincenzo Capone to the stand.
And you can see the whole Capone family and attorneys get uncomfortable, right? Like, oh
right,
no,
exactly.
I thought he was dead.
Right. So the way I wanted to end this episode was to say that every subject we've talked about, modern days or historical, everybody is making up their own mythology in their head about why they did something, why they're about to do something, why they're putting something off, why they're not achieving what they could. Everybody has a mythology in their own head. It serves some people very, very well. It fails to serve some people in a spectacular way that allows them to sort of sit in place and do nothing. Now, of the people we've talked about, do you think James Hart deserved to give himself this new mythology he did? Even though it didn't fit his birth, it literally didn't fit his background. He had to drop his accent to get it. He had to like invent a cowboy name. Like he did the most self-mythologizing you can possibly do, and he did a hell of a lot of good with it. Is that justified? I ask you.
1,000%. And I think he became a better person in it and helped more people and served the world better.
And that should probably be our goal then, is if you make a mythology for yourself, make damn sure it's going to make you a better person.